It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Southport, where 2 children have died in a stabbing attack. 9 other children have been injured and 6 are in a critical condition in hospital after an attack at a dance workshop here on Hart Street.
It's like a nightmare. The biggest horrific thing you could ever witness in your life, seeing little kids like that. And the parents coming and crying and screaming.
The King and the Prime Minister among those expressing their shock as police arrest a 17-year-old from Lancashire.
I can't begin to imagine the pain and suffering that the families of the victims are going through.
Also tonight on Sky News at 10, the Chancellor announces major cuts to public finances, accusing the previous government of hiding a £20 billion black hole. Former BBC presenter Huw Edwards is charged with making indecent images of children. And it's a Magic Monday for Team GB in Paris, including gold and silver in mountain biking and in the pool. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening. There's quite devastation in this community here in Southport tonight as it has been dealt the most devastating blow today. 2 children have died and 9 more have been injured. 6 of them are in a critical condition after what police called a ferocious stabbing attack at a dance workshop in Hart Street just behind me. 2 adults are also in a critical condition tonight. Tributes have been paid by the King and the Prince and Princess of Wales, who called it a horrid and heinous attack. Sky's Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam has tonight's first report.
On a quiet suburban street, the aftermath of what one witness said was like a scene from a horror movie. The police activity around what's called the Hart Space, a community venue used mostly by parent and baby groups. Images from inside show signs on the wall describing it as our happy place. Today, primary school children had gathered for a Taylor Swift yoga and dance workshop. What that happy place turned into was captured by a neighbour. Pictures showing local people and emergency services treating children in the street. A man who runs the business next door saw the suspected attacker arrive and victims being brought out.
I'm on the phone before I'd really seen all this for the police. You need to come now. You need to come now. Bring everybody. We want as many ambulances as you can get. I don't know how many girls were left in that building. He was still in there. And I thought, God, he's going to kill them all. You know, so it's like a nightmare. The biggest horrific thing you could ever witness in your life, seeing little kids like that. And the parents coming and crying and screaming.
Another neighbour who didn't want to show his face described what his mother saw.
She can hear screaming and crying, and she goes out. She goes round to see what happened, and all she said was she saw the members of, I don't know, either police or ambulance. She said she could see the stab wounds in the backs of the children, yeah.
This evening, Merseyside police confirmed the worst.
It is with great sadness today I'm here to advise that 2 children have died as a result of the injuries sustained in this morning's knife attack. 9 other children have been injured and 6 of them are in a critical condition. All those injured have suffered stab wounds sustained during the attack, and 2 adults are also in a critical condition after being injured during the incident.
The emergency response included 4 air ambulances dispatched to a field nearby, with some 13 ambulances sent to the scene. Some of the injured were taken to Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool. It declared a major incident and urged people only to come to A&E in an emergency. A school nearby was set up as a centre for families desperate for news, the sense of horror spreading throughout the community and across the country. The King posted of his and the Queen's profound shock at what he called an utterly horrific incident. He said they sent their most heartfelt condolences, prayers and deepest sympathies. The Prime Minister giving voice to the nation's thoughts.
The events today are just truly awful, and I know the whole country is is deeply shocked at what they've seen and what they've heard. And I know I speak for everybody in the whole country in saying our thoughts and condolences with the victims, their families, their friends and the wider community. And it's almost impossible to imagine the grief that they're going through and the trauma that they're going through.
A 17-year-old male who was arrested remains in custody. Efforts are ongoing to establish a motive for the attack. Police say it's not currently being treated as terror-related. They say they're not looking for anyone else in connection with the incident, and they've urged the public not to speculate. But this horror happened on their doorstep, the victims including some of society's most vulnerable, in a seaside resort in the summer holidays, and the most unimaginable act. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
So as we heard from Greg there, 2 children have died today, 9 more have been injured, and a 17-year-old is tonight in custody. Sky's Shingi Marike has been working with our data and forensics team to bring you everything we know about what unfolded here today.
It's an act of violence that shattered the peace of the summer holidays in a seaside town, with the facts still emerging. What we do know is this attack on children and the adults who tried to protect them took place on Hart Street in Southport, at this yoga and dance space called Heart Space, located in a largely residential street less than a 5-minute drive from the centre of town, a place of safety and fun for children and parents. This morning it was hosting a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga class for 6 to 11-year-olds at the time the attack took place. The class began at 10 a.m. and was due to last 2 hours. It's not known precisely when the attack began, but witnesses described hearing the sound of screams and seeing children running from the venue. At 11:47 a.m, the Northwest Ambulance Service responded to a call at Hart Street with reports of multiple stabbings. Soon after that, parents due to pick up their children arrived to face a scene they would have feared more than any other. In these images, taken from the house in front of the Hart Space, paramedics desperately worked to save the lives of children and 2 adults on the street. A 17-year-old boy was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and is being interviewed by police. Police say he is originally born in Cardiff, living in Banks in Lancashire. A large cordon has been in place for much of the day, covering most of the surrounding area, as police investigate. At this cordon, we've not just seen a police presence, but people from the community impacted by this attack. Some are laying flowers, others are asking questions about how this could have happened here. Emergency services have established a local command centre at a nearby high school. The victims were rushed to several hospitals in the Merseyside and Manchester areas. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Alder Children's Hospital declared a major incident, urging others to avoid coming, as it dealt with multiple casualties. Those are all the details we have so far. The facts behind the horror of this attack that has left several children and 2 adults fighting for their lives. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Southport.
Well, Greg is with me now. Greg Milam is with me now here in Southport, and Asha Hiranag is at Alder Hospital, where some of the children, we understand, were taken earlier on today. Greg, I'll talk to you first. You've been following this since we first started getting details of it this afternoon, the attack happening just before midday today, and it was the community that heard about it first, that saw it first, that were on the scene first. They were very much part of that first response.
Yeah, they saw those air ambulances and saw 4 of them, and I think that told the community what the scale of this was. And tonight, of course, they have us at the end of the road. They have all this police activity still going on. But we know that the community was part of that response. I spoke to a man called Colin Parry, who's in my report, who said while he was on the phone calling the police, telling them to send everything, there was a local man going into that building, bringing people out who were injured. Some of those members of the public were holding up the drip bags for the first paramedics who were on the scene, firefighters among those first responders on the scene, people clearing this road so that families could get down here to see what was going on and find out about their own children. So an extraordinary community response, and people who saw the faces of those firefighters, people who do this for a living, say you could see the real shock on their faces at what they were seeing there, the fact it was children extremely difficult even for very professional first responders. And tonight, of course, the investigation continuing. We've seen forensics teams, even in the last half an hour as dark has been falling, carrying out a sweep of this road, using torches, looking under cars, looking for anything that helps build a picture that will help them with that investigation. And of course, we know that that 17-year-old remains in custody, and the police urging people who know anything, appealing for information from anyone who saw the run-up to what happened here to come forward. OK,
Greg, for the moment, thank you. Let's bring in our correspondent, Ashna Hiranag, who is at Alderhay Children's Hospital. Ashna, what details can you bring us from there?
This incident has gotten more tragic and shocking as the day has gone on, as those children aged 6 and 11 years old, between those ages, attended that summer holidays dance workshop. 2 of them today, as we've been hearing, tragically lost their lives. We know 9 other children have been injured, with 6 other of those children having been critically injured. We know some of them were taken here to Alderhay Children's Hospital. We know some of them were also taken down the road to Manchester Children's Hospital. Those 2 facilities chosen because they specialise in paediatric care of this nature. They are both major trauma centres. This one behind me treats some 450,000 children every single year. But such was the desperate need for resources earlier today. This hospital declared what they called a major incident, in that they asked parents and children to not come to their accident and emergency department only if it was absolutely urgent, because all of their resources and all of their staff were focused on trying to treat those who had been critically injured. Not forgetting, of course, those 2 other adults also injured in this incident. It's understood those adults had been trying to protect those children. Ultimately, the thoughts of everyone here, certainly with staff and officers, remain inside, guarding what is the waiting room and the surrounding rooms, which we know families and loved ones who've been in attendance here today, desperate for information. What everyone here is thinking and feeling is this desperate thought and condolences very much with those families whose lives have been irrevocably changed together.
Ashna, thank you. Ashna Hiranag, keeping across details and events at Alderhay Children's Hospital while we wait for news for the children that are in a critical condition. 6 of them in a critical condition tonight, 9 in total injured, 2, of course, losing their lives here today, dying as a result of the injuries they sustained in what has been described by police as a ferocious attack here in Southport. It really is a scene of quiet devastation here tonight in Southport. We've seen members of the public, even at this late hour, coming up to the police cordon to lay flowers. The floral tributes have been growing throughout the evening. People walking their dog, getting home from work, coming down here with their children, just to take a moment to stand here and pay their respects. This is a residential area. Many of the streets around here look just like this one. It's so normal, it's so innocuous. This is a community populated by houses with families and young children. It really is a devastating night for Southport. We'll continue to follow events here throughout the course of the evening and into tomorrow. But for now, I'll hand back to Barbara in the studio. Barbara.
SJ, thank you. Let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. There is a £22 billion hole in public finances. That was the message from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who, standing in the Commons, accused the last Conservative government of hiding it from the country. Ms Reeves made her statement off the back of a Treasury review into government finances. Well, let's take a look at some of the key points from today. Among the cuts announced were winter fuel payments, which from this year will only be available to people who receive pension credit or other means-tested benefits. A £1.7 billion tunnel under Stonehenge, which was designed to ease traffic, is now not going to go ahead. A programme to build 40 new hospitals, originally launched by Boris Johnson, is on pause and subject to a review. And various improvements to train lines and new stations will now be scrapped. However, the government will pay out to millions of public sector workers with above-inflation pay rises of 5.5% for teachers and some NHS workers, including junior doctors, if they accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise that was announced today. Well, overall, the Chancellor says she's keen to cut down on government waste and will set up an Office of Value for Money to assess all government spending. Well, today she didn't announce any new tax rises, but they could come on the 30th of October when Rachel Reeves will deliver her first budget. Sky's deputy political editor Sam Coates reports.
Change over.
The new team running Britain's economy, settling into power, painting a grim picture of what they've taken over.
We have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. A £22 billion hole in the public finances now.
A cover-up, she says, with some departments spending billions more than publicly known.
The document I am publishing today reveals a projected overspend on the asylum system, including their failed Rwanda plan, for this year alone, of more than £6.4 billion.
The Chancellor's charge sheet had ex-ministers raging. But nearly half of this black hole is down to a political choice: bumper pay rises for public sector workers.
The right decision for the people who work in, and most importantly, the people who use our public services.
But that means big cuts to come. Road and hospital projects cancelled, and the winter fuel allowance for pensioners scrapped for all but the worst off. The political blame game will be fierce.
They spent like there was no tomorrow, because they knew that someone else would pick up the bill.
Absolutely. Jeremy Hunt!
The ex-Chancellor's legacy on the line, alleging it was Labour who hid the truth from the public.
They told us they had no plans to raise taxes. Now, in a U-turn that will forever shame this Labour government, she is laying the ground to break her word. And when she does, her first budget will become the biggest betrayal in history by a new Chancellor.
There's big questions for the people in here. The Office for Budget Responsibility has launched a probe into who in the Treasury knew what about the overspend. But today is about winning voters' support for the pain ahead.
Charity Aid UK say that up to 2 million pensioners who need it won't get winter fuel allowance, yet you're offering 20% plus pay rises for junior doctors over 2 years. What does that tell us about the instincts of your government?
Well, first of all, the costs of not settling the pay dispute has real costs as well. It's not an easy decision to announce that winter fuel payment would only go to people receiving pensioner credit, but it is the right decision in the circumstances in which we find ourselves.
This is about using the past to justify the future. So many of Rachel Reeves' most painful decisions today weren't in the Labour manifesto, with a strong signal of tax rises in an October budget. But did the Chancellor really provide the evidence to justify such big spending cuts? Both sides have tried to use this man to support their arguments.
Both Jeremy Hunt and Rachel Reeves used your name in the Commons chamber. The bottom line is there a £22 billion black hole?
Half of that, nearly £10 billion, is choices she's made on public sector pay. I think this money for asylum seekers and so on, not in the Home Office budget, doesn't seem to be being covered by the reserve. Those sorts of numbers do look like unfunded commitments from the last government.
Labour says the Tories never did fix the roof while the sun was shining, so there's spending cuts and tax rises to come. Will voters accept they're worth it to balance the books? Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, after delivering a statement to the Commons, the Chancellor held a news conference. It was there that she was pushed on what the £20 billion hole in the public finances actually means for people. Sky's business correspondent has been analysing what we heard today and whether tax cuts are inevitable.
Rachel Reeves' first major intervention as Chancellor was to set out a black hole in the public finances she said she didn't know about, and we urgently needed to. This is how she accounted for the budgetary pressures. A lot of numbers, I'll just pick the big ones. Pay, £11.6 billion. Most of that because Rachel Reeves is accepting the recommendations of a 5.5% roughly pay award across the public sector. £6.4 billion for the asylum and legal migration system. Most of that, hotel bills for people whose claims aren't being processed. Pick one more, health, £1.5 billion. A lot of that is the cost of industrial action the pay award is supposed to avoid. Once you take off some accounting measures the Treasury does here in blue, you're left with nearly £22 billion, Rachel Reeves says has to be found this year to make the sums add up. Well, what's she going to do about it? Well, she says she's making some cuts immediately and next year. This is this year's cuts. £3 billion in savings, every Chancellor says that. Here's the big unexpected policy decision. £1.4 billion saved from cutting winter fuel payments to pensioners. They didn't hear about that. 10 million people won't get it. It wasn't mentioned in the election. We knew Rwanda was going. Adult social care's in the long grass now, and some road and rail. No Stonehenge tunnel. We'll add all this up this year, £5.5 billion. Still leaves £16.4 billion to find. How's she going to do it? Well, we know it's going to be difficult because this is the state of the public finances, what's being spent and what's coming in before the black hole was found. And look, there's a deficit between what is being brought in and what's being spent already of £87 billion. That's borrowed to cover. There's £16.4 billion to find on top of that. Now, Rachel Reeves hasn't been given us any detail on what she's going to do in the budget, but tax rises are definitely on the table. Problem for Rachel Reeves is she has painted herself into a corner by ruling out income taxes, VAT and corporation tax going up. They account for 70% of tax-raising powers, so it's left to perhaps some capital taxes, perhaps pension reform. We'll find out in October what she's going to do. A quick word finally on pay. Why accept that above-inflation uplift to public sector pay? It's because of this, the gap between public sector pay, the red line, and private sector. It was growing, it was becoming less attractive to work in the public sector. So to improve recruitment and retention, pay is going up. Now, the row about how Rachel Reeves arrived at these numbers will continue, but it's very hard to argue that the inheritance in the public finances is anything but dire.
Well, part of the announcement from the Chancellor today was about public sector pay. After more than a year of industrial action, the government has offered junior doctors in England a 22.3% pay rise over 2 years. Sky's health correspondent Ashish Joshi looks at the details.
What do you want? Fair pay! When do you want it? Now!
After 18 months of unprecedented and crippling strike action, a deal for the junior doctors.
We're recommending it to our members because it is a credible offer. It addresses inflation for the previous 2 years and shows that there is scope for the rest of the pay that's been lost to be recouped in the future.
The latest government offer includes a backdated rise of around 4% for 2023-2024. That's on top of the existing increase of around 9% for that year. An additional 6% increase is then being offered for this year, topped up with an extra £1,000 payment, bringing the total over 2 years to an average of 22%. The offer still has to be voted on by junior doctors. Only then will the government be able to say it's achieved in 3 weeks what the previous government failed to do in a year and a half. The Health Secretary knows he has to bring these strikes by the junior doctors to an end if he is to have any real impact on the NHS waiting list. But the deal that's been offered to the BMA might set a dangerous precedent. Other healthcare staff, such as nurses, midwives and paramedics, were also offered a pay rise today. Medical technician and Unite member David Donoghue says while he's pleased for junior doctors, other NHS staff deserve bigger pay awards too.
We've been offered less than a quarter of their settlement. It's a fraction, and it's a little bit disappointing to say the least, and a lot of our members are going to be quite unhappy with that. We would like to be able to campaign for further restorative pay rises for NHS workers as well.
Healthcare workers aren't the only public sector pay workers being offered more pay. Teachers like Deborah Eggleston will join firefighters, police and prison officers in receiving above-inflation pay rises.
For me, it's the ability to not have to say, not have to actually make hard decisions about what we buy in the house and the, the activities that we do.
Underpaid!
A potential end to the junior doctor strike won't cure the NHS, and problems in the rest of the public sector won't be fixed by above-inflation pay rises. But after 18 months of disruption, the government will hope that this will finally bring positive change. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Former BBC TV presenter Huw Edwards has been charged with making indecent images of children. Police have said his alleged offences took place between December 2020 and April 2022 and relate to images shared in a WhatsApp chat. Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
Tonight at 10,
Fronting the BBC's flagship News at 10 for 2 decades, Huw Edwards was trusted to deliver moments like this.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
One of the BBC's best-paid presenters, named only last week as the corporation's third highest earner, despite not having appeared on the channel since July 2023, resigning from his job on medical grounds in April after he made the front pages, accused of paying a 17-year-old for indecent images. At the time, police found no evidence of criminal behaviour.
It's been over a year since Edwards was last here reading the news. The Metropolitan Police confirming he was questioned last November and charged last month with 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
In a statement, the force explaining the offences, which are alleged to have taken place between December 2020 and April 2022, relate to images shared on a WhatsApp chat. Edwards is accused of making 37 images in total, 6 of which are Category A, the most serious categorisation. If found guilty, the former newsreader could face a sentence of up to 6 months in prison. While he hasn't been seen in over a year, he'll have no choice but to face many of his peers on Wednesday, when he'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court. His life dramatically shifting from reading the news to becoming the story. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
The Foreign Secretary is advising British nationals to leave Lebanon and not travel to the country as tensions rise between Hezbollah and Israel. Israel and the US have blamed Hezbollah for a rocket strike which killed 12 children and teenagers, but the Iranian-backed group has denied it was responsible. Well, Hezbollah has launched over 820 rocket and drone attacks into Israel since October 7th. Most have been close to the border, but recent strikes have hit further into the country. Israel has responded with over 4,200 strikes of its own, concentrated in the south of Lebanon, but it's also used rockets to assassinate Hezbollah operatives as far as 100 kilometers into the country. Well, the IDF has created a 3-kilometer buffer zone along the border, evacuating more than 60,000 people, while more than 100,000 people have been displaced in Lebanon. Saturday's deadly strike was in an area outside the evacuation zone in the occupied Golan Heights. The IDF says Hezbollah fired an Iranian-made rocket from around 10 kilometers away at the limits of the range of the Falak-1 rocket. Hezbollah denies this, but says they did target a military base with this type of rocket on the same day. The Ma'ale Golan IDF base is around 2 miles from the football pitch. Israel says it will respond to the strike at a time of its choosing, but the Druze community hit by the attack has responded with anger to Israeli politicians. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports now from the Lebanese capital, Beirut.
The Druze community of Majd al-Shams is still burying its dead children. An 11-year-old football-mad boy became the 12th child victim to be mourned. Guevara's family had clung to the hope he'd somehow escaped. Now they believe he was directly hit by the rocket. It's shaken our hearts, a relative said. The football pitch is festooned with black ribbons. The community is still in deep shock, but there's considerable raw anger too. Get out, they're shouting at the arrival of the Israeli Prime Minister. Then war criminal, they call him, and assassin. The Israeli leader, seen as the head of the occupying force here, is not welcome. But he and his defense minister will decide what happens next. They're blaming Lebanon's Hezbollah and keep on promising a tough response.
The state of Israel will not and cannot ignore this. Our response will come, and it will be severe.
Lebanon is bracing itself for Israeli retribution, and some airlines have begun cancelling flights, with several embassies warning against travel to the country. So far, the cross-border attacks have followed the pattern of the last 9 months. whilst diplomatic efforts ramp up to stop further escalation. The Lebanese foreign minister has urged America to use its influence wisely.
So the Golan is not Israel. Golan is Syrian, occupied by Israel, and therefore it's not self-defense. And therefore it doesn't mean give them a license to kill and destroy like they took in Gaza.
And there continued to be dire warnings all round of the potential for this to explode into regional warfare.
A miscalculation could definitely trigger a regional conflict with catastrophic consequences for everyone.
Hezbollah continues to deny it fired the rocket, but amid calls for an independent investigation, Israel isn't listening, and the stakes are high as Lebanon and the region waits to see what happens. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
It's been a golden day for Team GB in Paris today. It was a dramatic end for Tom Pidcock on the mountain bike, who claimed Olympic gold after a flat tire and an incredible comeback. And Tom Daley came out of retirement to get silver in the synchro diving. From Paris, our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports.
Not since 1948 has this been heard at the Olympics. God save the King. On a majestic Monday, finally GB golds in Paris. Incredibly, even after this, for Tom Pidcock. Even the best cyclist can suffer a puncture. It's how you recover and how quickly. And from 40 seconds behind, he bursts back through. Battling to regain the lead, Pidcock defending his Olympic mountain bike title. France picked to gold. For the second time in 2 hours. An equestrian leaping ahead through Laura Collett in the show jumping. The eventing team crowned champions at the Palace of Versailles, with Collett later adding individual bronze. In synchronised diving, Tom Daley was also trying to claim back-to-back golds. Back after a 2-year break, linking up this time with Noah Williams. But facing a tougher Chinese challenge, so satisfied with second.
To be able to have one more go out at it and be able to come away with a silver and sit with Noah, it was very special. So yeah, definitely on a high. I have a different perspective on what the Olympics means for me. Like for now, like my family is the most important, and being able to compete in front of them and for them was really special.
But to have made it to 5 Olympics, and the fact you had the person who inspired you to keep going there watching.
Oh, I mean, when your kid asks you to do something, you do it, or else you know, like, all hell will break loose. And Robbie saying, oh, I want to see you dive at the Olympics was the perfect hook.
Who's become 5 medals from 5 Olympics for Daley. A first for Williams, dedicated to coach Dave Jenkins, who suddenly died after the Tokyo Games.
I've cried far too much today. It was crazy emotional. I didn't think I would, but yeah, I mean, getting messages from, you know, his wife, and I feel like I finally, you know, did him proud.
And there were more sensational silvers for Adam Burgess in canoe slalom, and in the pool for Matt Richards in the 200 freestyle. On day 3, Team GB's tally is up to 10. Is this the start of a medal charge? Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Hello and welcome back to Southport. A scene of quiet devastation here tonight, a community trying to come to terms with what happened just before midday today. A very different scene than this afternoon. The sound of screams, sirens and helicopters landing nearby, air ambulances. We do know that 2 children died as a result of their injuries today. 9 are being treated at a number of hospitals in the northwest. 6, we understand, are in a critical condition. We also know that 2 adults were injured in the stabbing attack today. Merseyside police saying that they believed they were injured trying to protect those young people. I'm standing at the scene tonight, this road here, Hart Lane in Southport. A workshop was taking place. Many of you watching tonight will have dropped your children or your grandchildren at similar summer camps, summer classes, and what is the start of the summer holidays. And what has struck me, seeing the promotional leaflet for what was happening today, is that this attack took place 10 minutes before that workshop was due to end. And this man going in to that workshop and carrying out this mass stabbing. What we know about the investigation is that a 17-year-old has been arrested and is being questioned. This obviously is now a murder and an attempted murder investigation. We are awaiting more details from the police as they continue to question that suspect. As I said, a 17-year-old from Lancashire, originally, we understand, from Cardiff. Such is the magnitude of what's happened today. It's hard to put into words, but key figures, the Prime Minister, the King and Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Archbishop coming out this afternoon, trying to put the shock and horror that the UK is feeling tonight into words. And those words, shock and horror, repeated in all of their statements because it's hard to find any other words, quite frankly. Young children at the start of the summer, going to a Taylor Swift workshop. We know how popular Taylor Swift is with young people. And some of them not coming out of that alive. It's really hard to get your head around. As I drove here this afternoon, what struck me was it was a gorgeous summer day. If you know Southport, you know how popular it is with those who come here to enjoy the beauty of the surroundings, the nearby beach. We've got local residents actually coming to lay flowers. That's been a constant stream of people throughout the afternoon and evening. And this is an ordinary residential area. Families occupy these houses around me. And it is abject horror that has come to their doorstep today. We are following events here on Sky News, bringing you updates as and when we can. And our thoughts, as I'm sure yours are with those families affected tonight. We will bring you more as and when we get it. In the meantime, I'm going to hand back to Barbara Sarah. Barbara.
SJ, thank you. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up slightly later than usual, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elson, and the journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman. Among the stories that we will be discussing, this, of course, on the front of the eye about tonight's top story, those stabbings in Southport. The headline, deadly knife attack at children's dance class. We'll be right back.